Found Duckling by EvaDragon. Notes from me, not from author. So this chapter has both Danny and Danny, which you can't really tell the difference when you hear them both out loud. So to avoid confusion, when it's Danny, D-A-N-N-Y, the main character, I will be leaving my voice the same. But when it's Danny, D-A-N-I, the clone, I will be putting on a filter, but it's going to be when I just say the name, so that way you can better understand who's talking. Yeah. Also, thanks for, all the support I got while making this. I really appreciate it. So, back to the actual chapter. Chapter 8. Danny and Jason. Summary. Danny! Also, Danny takes the pit rage from Jason. Hey, Gremlin, Danny said softly. A smile could be heard in his voice. Hey, a template, replied his soft feminine voice. The four Waynes and pseudo-grandfather froze. Danny had been alone in the sitting room. No one had entered the house through any of the doors, and the alarms hadn't been triggered on any of the windows. The voice sounded like it was in the room with Danny. So, who in the hell was in the room with Danny? But, at the same time, Danny didn't seem too surprised at the new presence. In fact, he seemed comfortable, familiar with whoever was in there with him. Jazz told me about what happened. The voice sounded sad. Don't blame yourself. I'm glad you weren't there. You didn't need to see all that anyways, Danny replied firmly. But Danny, I should have... Nope, you don't get to blame yourself because you were safe. It would have been 100 times worse if I knew that they'd gotten you too, Danny said, still in that firm tone of voice. There was a sigh, as if they weren't sure if they believed Danny. Come here, Gremlin. There was a shuffle of fabric. Look, it happened. It sucked rocks. But Jazz, Sam, and Tucker got me out. That's all that matters. I won't say that I'm okay because Ancients knows I'm not. I still have nightmares. But I'm getting better. Hey, Danny? The voice said after a few minutes of silence. Did you, get adopted by another Fruit Loop? The voice giggled. Be nice, Gremlin, but they're, kind of already my family, Danny replied. I thought the Fentons were your parents? The voice asked, confusion lacing her voice. I thought so too, but I found out I was adopted. Turns out my bio parents gave me to the Fentons when I was a baby. Even though my bio parents are dead, I found out that we have a brother, Danny explained. What? No way! The girl exclaimed. She sounded both excited and a tad scared. Don't worry, Jazz is still our sister regardless of biology, Danny was quick to reassure the girl. There were several more minutes of silence. The Waynes and Alfred were still processing the conversation. Hey, Danny? The girl called again. Danny hummed in acknowledgement. I've been thinking. Oh, my ancients! That's a dangerous thing, Gremlin. Danny replied with a laugh. There was a yelp, and then, no biting, you little shit. You're worse than the raccoons, I swear. And they were feral. But you still love me, the girl said in a sing-song voice. Anyways, I've been thinking about maybe settling down, going to school, like a real brick-and-mortar school, like you and Jazz did. But I can't or don't want to stay with Jazz, and I don't really want to be in Amity Park. No, came Danny's shout. The listening Waynes and Alfred tensed at Danny's shout. No, Danny said more calmly. Amity's not safe. The Fentons aren't safe. Don't even think about going to the Fruit Loop, Danny all but snarled. What else do you suggest then? The girl snarked. Maybe I can ask my new family. I bet they'd be happy to have you, Danny suggested. Wait, really? There was hope in the girl's voice. Maybe. I know Cass and Steph are always talking about adding another girl to the mix, and I know that Tim and Babs are really good with making paperwork and stuff, Danny said thoughtfully. We could be family, like real family. The giddiness in the girl's voice was almost palpable. But aren't these guys like Fruit Loops? I already told you to be nice. Besides, they're way better than fucking Vlad. Danny spat the name, but at least now the eavesdropping Waynes now had a name for the Fruit Loop. That's a low bar, though, Danny. Anyone's better than Vlad, the girl agreed. They both devolved into giggles. But seriously, you'd think they'd take me in? I haven't talked to Bruce about officially adopting me yet, but I want him to. Adopt me, that is. Bruce didn't have tears in his eyes. No, he didn't. And he's my legal guardian. I'm just waiting for the Justice League to take down the Anti-Ecto Control Acts, which shouldn't be too much longer. From what I've been told, the UN meeting is in 3 days, and the Justice League has been putting pressure on them to force the US to repeal the acts. Something about withdrawing some of their support if the US didn't comply. Does this mean that those Men in Black knockoffs are going down? The girl sounded as feral as Danny had accused her of being. Yes, you feral shit gremlin raccoon. And no, you can't be part of it, Danny scolded. But Danny, the girl whined. Danny, they have weapons from the Fentons, which means that they have weapons that can hurt you. I'm not just talking about the smaller stuff like a wrist ray. Who knows what Jack and Maddie have invented since I was caught and since I've been gone. They did some pretty bad stuff to me, Danny, and I can't lose you. Well, at least now the listening Waynes knew who the girl was. Wait. Danny? The clone? Danny was a girl, but Danny was a male. Oh dear and holy gods. Did Danny know what that meant? Did he know the implications behind that? Bruce looked like he was sucking both a lemon and a lime. At the same time, Dick wanted to reach for his Eskrima sticks. Jason was struggling to work through several breathing techniques, so his vision didn't go completely green with pit rage. And Tim was seriously considering breaking Bruce's no-kill rule as soon as he found the fucker who cloned his brother. Not that he wouldn't love his newfound sister any less, but there would be hell to pay for one who cloned Danny. Hey, Danny, do you want to meet them? The family, I mean, Danny asked. Are you sure they'll like me? Danny asked uncertainly. Damien might try to throw a knife at you because he's just as much a feral shit gremlin as you are, but hey, I've already captured 4 of them off him. If they go through me, they're mine. Plus, they know about me being Phantom, and they're cool with it. Wait, they know? Danny screeched. Danny laughed. Let me text Tim. They're gonna love you. I bet Steph and Cass steal you. We can figure out what grade to put you in. I think Damien is in 9th grade. Maybe we can get you set up in the same grade in school as him. You'd probably have to, take a placement exam or something to make sure that's where you actually are academically, but you're my clone, which means you're not stupid. You also need to decide how old you are. I know how old you were aged up to be, but Frostbite says that your core's in flux until you decide how old you decide to be. But if you settle and we get legal paperwork, that means no more fluctuations. Yeah, I get that. So who's Damien to you? I guess you would call him my little brother. Our older brother, Tim, was officially adopted by Bruce, and Damien is Bruce's youngest child. I'm in between Tim and Damien. How many siblings did you get with this new family? Danny asked incredulously. A lot. There's Dick, Danny started. He gets called that on purpose? Dick snorted in the other room. His family wasn't from America, and they didn't know the English connotations of the word. Anyways, Dick is the oldest. He was Bruce's ward when his parents died. Then Cass was adopted from an abusive family situation. Jason was adopted when he tried to steal Bruce's tires. Tim and I's parents were neglectful as shit, so Bruce took him in, and eventually adopted him when the Drakes died. Damien, from what I was told, was with his mother until he was 10, and then was a surprise baby who was dropped on Bruce's doorstep one day. Duke was the newest foster before me. His parents died in a rogue attack, I think. Steph and Babs are family friends, but they might as well be adopted at this point. And then there's me, and now you. Damn, Danny. Could you have found a bigger family? Danny asked between snorts of laughter. I forgot to mention Alfred. He's the butler, but also the family grandfather. He's magic. Danny said sagely. Danny snorted some more. Tim had replied to Danny that the family would be arriving so he could prepare Danny, but it would be the entire family. The family's on the way. Tim said it was the entire family, so everyone I just mentioned. Are you sure about this? Danny asked, suddenly insecure. Yes, you gremlin. You'll like them and they'll like you, Danny said with quick reassurances. Honey, I'm home, Dick called from the front door. He'd made a point of rushing back to the front door to make as much noise as possible so that Danny and Danny would know that they were no longer as alone as they thought. Hey, Dick, I'm in the sitting room, Danny called back. The 4 Waynes, technically 3 Waynes, and 1 Grayson, entered the sitting room where the 2 Dannys were located. They knew that Danny was a clone, but gods, they still weren't prepared for the look-alike when they walked into the room. They could have been twins. Fortunately, the rest of the family arrived hot on the heels of Dick and the others entering the room, so no one had room to say anything. Once everyone was settled, Danny made the necessary introductions. Everyone, this is Danny with an I, my clone sister, Danny said easily. Then he pointed out who each person was when Danny fiddled nervously. How did you 2 meet? Bruce was the first to recover his surprise. Danny was sent to kill me. A snort and a giggle went through the room. Isn't that the case with most clones? Steph retorted. Danny looked at her in surprise. You have experience with other clones? He squeaked. Everyone in the room nodded. Oh. He took a moment to process. Danny nudged him to continue. Anyways, the Fruit Loop wanted me as his perfect son, and when I denied him, he cloned me. Most of the clones destabilized, except for Danny. He convinced her that he would save her from the same fate if she would kidnap me and bring me back to his evil lair. Once I freed myself, the Fruit Loop and I fought. He convinced Danny to try and kill me. That killing me was the only way to save her. Eventually, I was able to convince her that the Fruit Loop was full of shit, so she turned against him. At first, we just told everyone that she was my cousin, but that didn't exactly feel right. So now she's my sister. At first, we just told everyone that she was my cousin, but that didn't exactly feel right. So now she's my sister, and only Team Phantom know that she's my clone. The family was silent. Not even Superman had been as much of an adult about his clone as Danny, and Superman was an adult. He was getting better, and his relationship with Superboy, the first, was improving, but still. And all the clones that Talia had sent after Damien had been nothing but mindless violence and killing from the get-go, to the point where Damien and the others had had no choice but to kill the clones. Not for the first time, Danny was showing an incredible amount of maturity for his age. Hey, Bruce, there are a couple of things I would like to ask you if you have the time, Danny said as he rubbed the back of his neck in a familiar tick. Do you want to talk here or up in the study? Bruce asked with a small smile. Here's fine, Danny said, a little surer of himself now. First thing, Danny is wanting to settle down. We were wondering if she could settle in with us. As predicted, Steph squealed, casted a happy dance, and was furiously signing new sister. And Babs was already typing on her computer. Danny, what's your preferred name? Babs asked. Well, I was named Danielle because Daniel. The Fruit Loop didn't have a lot of originality, Danny replied with a snort. Okay, but do you want to keep that name? Babs pressed. Danny considered for a moment. I'm kind of attached to being Danny. We match, she said, pointing to Danny. She and Danny shared a grin. But I don't have a middle name. The Fruit Loop wasn't that creative. I know his middle name is James, so maybe something with a J? Babs thought for a moment. Okay, you two look too much alike to be anything other than twins, so that's what we're going with. It will also make our cover story easier. Janet hid her pregnancy with Danny, after all. And twins being separated at birth is a common story these days. As for why Danny isn't in school and you are, we can say that you were homeschooled up till recently. And we stick to Danny's original story. Babs looked around the room. Both Dannys were grinning like loons, and Tim was nodding in agreement. So for a middle name, does anyone have any suggestions? Jade, Juniper, Jasmine. Oh, ancients know. I have a sister that's named Jasmine. Danny butted in. Joanne, Jordan, or any of its spellings. Jacqueline. Danny and Danny both made faces at this suggestion. It was too close to Jack. Julia, Jamie. That one is close, but not quite, Danny said again, interrupting the names being thrown about. Jane. Danny glowed. Jackpot. So Danielle Jane. Tim, are we going with Drake Wayne or Drake Wayne? Babs asked Tim. Danny and Danny, your thoughts? Tim asked instead. Well, that leads me into the second thing I wanted to ask Bruce. I was wondering if he would adopt me, but I also want to share the same name as you, Tim, if you don't mind. Danny said as he flushed an adorable pink and rubbed the back of his neck. Tim blue-screened, and then, when his brain rebooted, he grinned the widest smile he could manage. His brother wanted to share a name with him. Tim looked over at Bruce, who was wearing a similar look. Danielle James Drake Wayne and Danielle Jane Drake Wayne. Those names have a good ring to them, Tim said with a grin still plastered on his face. The half-ghost and his clone glowed and purred. Hey, Jace, you got a minute? Danny asked as he walked into Jason's library. Sure, Casper, what's up? Jason replied, putting down his copy of Pride and Prejudice. He noticed that since Danny had been moved to the manor, being part of the family had been easier. He still had bouts of pit rage, but it had been getting easier. The voices in his head didn't whisper as loudly since Danny had joined the family. Well, I did promise you that I could fix your ecto problem. What? Danny, you were under the influence of whatever the fuck Scarecrow's fear gas was doing to you, Jason said, trying to organize his thoughts. Sure, doesn't mean what I said was any less true. It's taken all of my strength not to gag when I'm around you. But other than Tim, you're my favorite brother. From one undead guy to another. Both of them snort-giggled. So you really don't know what a Lazarus pit is? Jason asked, curious. No. Up until I came to Gotham, the furthest I had been from Amity Park was when we went to visit my aunt Alicia in Spittoon, Arkansas. So unless there's one in Arkansas, which I doubt, I have no fucking clue what you're even talking about, Danny said as he curled up on the sofa next to Jason. Jason considered his words. Danny already knew about their nightlife. He hadn't yet opted to take part of it. And realistically, they, the Bats, knew why. I guess it's my turn for sharing my tragic backstory, Jason heaved a sigh. You don't have to share anything you don't want to, Danny said, empathy, not sympathy, full in his voice. Danny was the one person who knew what it was like to die and come back wrong. Jason nodded, appreciative of the distinction. So after I dug myself out of my grave, I apparently wandered around Gotham in a mindless, catatonic state. I don't know how long before I was found by someone, not Bruce. This person belonged to a group called the League of Assassins. League of Assassins? Danny squeaked out. Yes, now hush. The person brought me back to their secret base and then dunked me in what they call a Lazarus pit. These pits heal the sick or dying, but kill the healthy. They are bright, toxic green, hot, and bubbling. And apparently, according to you, sewer water from the infinite realms. Not that they know that, but their leader has been using the pits to essentially keep himself alive for a few centuries. And occasionally, a super trusted member of the League, when they've been horribly injured, can procure themselves a rare drink. Now, normally, the pit rage only lasts a few hours to a few days, but for whatever reason, I'm the exception to the rule. Mine has lasted a few years. Danny looked at Jason with a thoughtful look on his face. I think it's because you're irreverent. I'm a what? Jason squeaked. Master Jason, Master Danny, I brought you some refreshments, Alfred said before Danny could explain anything. He set a carafe of hot tea and a tray of small sandwiches between the two brothers. Okay, there are different types of undead beings, right? Danny started. Jason nodded. You've been calling yourself a zombie, but that's not right, A zombie, to be technically correct, it's a mindless, brain-dead being whose sole purpose in the world is to devour the living flesh of others. There are other undead beings, but they're not important to this conversation. Danny paused and took a bite out of a sandwich and a sip of tea. Jason looked like he was still following the conversation. A reverend is something almost as rare as a halfa, and equally as cherished within the realms. But what a reverend is a spirit or soul that had unfinished business or an obsession and was basically pulled back into their own body without the presence of a ghost core. I think you had both, unfinished business and an obsession. That makes a lot of sense, actually, Jason practically whispered. So what, I'm possessing my own body? No, nothing like that. Your soul rebonded with your body, so not possession or overshadowing. Jason slumped in relief. Now the hard part. Whenever you came back, you didn't come back all the way. That's why you were catatonic. I think it's why those Lazarus pits were able to take a hold of you like they did. So I brought myself back, just not all the way, and the Lazarus pits finished the job, but left me kind of broken in the process? Jason asked to clarify. That's a good way of thinking about it. But essentially, yes. And what does this have to do with you fixing me? Jason circled back to why Danny had invaded his library to begin with. From what you've decided, these Lazarus pits sound like corrupted ecto. I know I said earlier being around you makes me want to gag, but I was kind of joking. In reality, I have been around ecto that's gone bad, and you smell like that. Which is what makes me think that the ectoplasm and these Lazarus pits are connected. And on top of that, you are a reverend. And that means what exactly? Jason snarked. I'm getting there, you walking tank. Danny snarked back. Jason laughed. The ecto in you got stuck. That's the best way to describe it. And since you don't have a core like me to filter it out or pull in fresh stuff from the air, which Gotham has plenty of, you're basically just recycling the icky stuff. So basically what I'm going to do is pull out the bad stuff while also filtering in the good stuff. Once I push you in the good stuff, you will automatically start filtering ecto from the ambient shit in the air. Will it hurt? Jason will be damned if he let Danny hurt himself just to make him feel better. I don't know. Never done anything like this before. Danny answered honestly instead of hedging like he normally would have. Danny. Jason? Jason sighed. Jason gave up first. Fine, but if anything goes wrong, I'm totally throwing you under the bus. That's fair, Danny said with a nod. So how are we doing this? I think it would be better if you were laying down. I'm not sure how you're going to react. Jason hummed as he laid down. He didn't know what to expect when Danny laid his cool hands on his chest. He was not expecting an ice bath. He was not expecting for his heart to jump near out of his chest. He was not expecting the pit to throw a temper tantrum and dig its heels in. He was not expecting a literal fight for his life. It took everything in all of this training to not scream. Somewhere above his head, he heard Danny grunt, and then a soft fucking hell floated from somewhere to his right. Then Jason knew nothing but darkness. Little Wing. Oh, that's Dick's voice. But why did he sound so worried? The fuck happened? Jason opened his eyes. Shit, they were in the cave. Jason groaned. He heard 2 sets of heart monitors. Shit, why were there 2 sets of monitors? Who else was in the cave? Dick face, what happened? Jason groaned out. Little Wing, we were hoping you could tell us. Alfred found you and Danny passed out in the library, or rather, you were passed out. Danny was having what looked like a seizure before he went unconscious. What happened? That explained the second heart monitor. Danny must be in the other bed. Jason didn't know how he was going to explain Danny's latest round of let's traumatize my new family to Dick. Tim, who he had noticed was hovering over Danny's bed, and Bruce, who had just entered the med bay. Jason groaned again, which was then echoed by Danny. What the fuck hit me? Danny rasped out. Danny, do you remember what happened? Tim asked. Alfred found you seizing and Jason unconscious. To be honest, I didn't know that would happen. Danny hedged. Danny, stop stalling, Tim said warningly. First, Jason, how do you really feel? Jason thought about it for a moment. Then he reached for the pit, and for the first time since he resurrected, his head was silent. There was no vile whispers in his head telling him how Bruce didn't love him, or how Tim replaced him, or how Batman chose the Joker over him, or how his family had pushed him out. He could finally breathe. He didn't realize he had started crying until he was smothered in one of Dick's famous octopus hugs. "J-Lad, what is it?" Bruce said softly. "Danny took the pit away," he replied in sheer awe. Notes. Danny. Meet Danny, the feral raccoon gremlin. Steph, Cass, and Babs. New sister. Everyone else. Do we even have a choice in this? Babs. No. Now shut up. I've got papers to forge. Danny. So, not a zombie. Jason. But I liked calling myself that. Danny. I'ma fix your pit rage now. Jason. I can't legally hold you to shit you said when you were high. Danny. Still gonna fix it. Danny. Traumatize his family by doing stupid shit because he's Danny and somehow it's part of his DNA now. Danny. Did anyone get the number of that train that hit me? Jason. Cries because pit rage is gone.